Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we got another news video here to discuss. So we got a couple of things to discuss, including a signing, a couple of waiver updates, a few injury updates, and some trade rumors involving the LA Kings, Tampa Bay Lightning, Ottawa Senators, Minnesota Wild, and Chicago Blackhawks. And we'll do all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Internet Hockey Channel. Before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I've never been able to do it with all of you guys, so don't forget to subscribe so we can hit 250 subscribers. Now, as usual, I'm going to start off today's video by discussing a signing from the past couple of days. It's not an overly significant signing, but just like the one we had a couple of days ago, it is pretty big because it pertains to the trade deadline, as the Chicago Blackhawks have extended one of the pending UFAs that could have been a deadline deal in Jason Dickinson. The Blackhawks have extended Dickinson on a 2-year contract extension with an AAV of $4.25 million. So that's a really big contract. He was never going to get that anywhere else. So sort of like Foligno, who signed a 2-year, $4.5 million extension just a couple of days ago, Dickinson gets an overpayment to remain in Chicago. So the Hawks are going to have to keep some people around for this rebuild, so they're trying to keep some of these guys who have definitely fit in extremely well with their team. So I don't have any problem with this sort of a deal. Dickinson's fit in really well. He's had a pretty good season this year so far. At this point in time, he's had 14 goals, 7 assists, 21 points in 44 games. At this point in time, he's only 9 points back of his career high in points that he hit last year with 30 points in his first year with Chicago. And he's already smashed his career high in goal totals, which was 9 on multiple occasions. So really good stuff there for Dickinson. He's having a phenomenal season. He's definitely extremely well in the Blackhawks middle six. I definitely think that the Hawks really do like him, so I don't think it's too much of a surprise he signed, but this does sort of change the direction of the Hawks, which we'll get to in a little bit. But still, it's a really decent signing in my opinion for the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, it's an overpayment for sure. Dickinson on a containing team will probably be worth like $1.5 to $2 million, but still, it's a really good deal. They need to sign players. They don't have a ton of players eating up their cap space over the next little while, so they need to try and sign some of these players to be really big pieces for their team for the next little while, and Dickinson seems to be one of those guys. So I think Dickinson is going to be a fantastic addition there for the Hawks for the next couple of years. He's been fitting extremely well. He's done fantastic with the Hawks, and now he's going to remain there for the next couple of years. So scratch Dickinson's name off the trade bait list. He's not going anywhere anymore. And he's one less pending UFA the Hawks have to worry about. Now there's been some talk that maybe the attention now shifts to Peter Mrazek, who's had a pretty good season this year. Maybe they want to try and keep him around for the next couple of years. So it's quite possible we could see a Peter Mrazek sign too, but it sounds like the Hawks are trying to keep some of their veteran players that they really do like and try to keep them around beyond this year instead of just moving them at the deadline. And it seems like they've done really well with that, with Jason Dickinson and Nick Foligno both being re-signed over the past couple of days. It'll be interesting to see who else could possibly get signed for the Blackhawks, but still, for a time being, Dickinson and Foligno are two guys who've been signed. That's really good stuff there for the Blackhawks. And I think Dickinson's already showed he can fit in there pretty well, and as a second or third line center, making $4.25 million, even though it's a bit of an overpayment, I think the Hawks will definitely like that for the next couple of years. So that's a really good sign there in my opinion, but it's the only sign we have over the past couple of days. So going over to the next waiver update part of the video, not too many waiver updates here to discuss either, but we do have a couple. First, on Tuesday, we saw Zohorna for the Pittsburgh Penguins be placed on waivers. I didn't think there was a possibility he could get claimed. He's actually been a pretty decent bottom six forward this year for the Pittsburgh Penguins, although he is more of a spare forward at this point in time, so I thought there was a probably very likely chance he cleared, but I thought that with how well he's played so far this year, there might have been a chance that he wound up getting claimed, and he did wind up clearing, so not too surprised that happened. I thought there might have been, like I said, a team who could have taken a chance on him, but instead he does wind up going to clear waivers, so he's going to be sent down to the minors. Not too surprised there, but still, Zohorna is a really good bottom six forward, and I think if the Penguins do run into some more injuries, or they feel like their bottom six isn't doing really good enough, he will definitely get called back up, so not too surprised there. And then yesterday we saw Duehr be placed on waivers. Now at this point in time, I don't know the exact outcome of it, given the fact waivers haven't finished at this point in time, but I do think there's a very likely chance Duehr could wind up getting claimed. Duehr is a really good bottom six forward. He's a little bit younger than some of these other guys. He's not fit in extremely well this year with the Calgary Flames. He's definitely been a healthy scratch at some points this year, but he's still a really good bottom six forward. Someone who I think could definitely be used in another team's bottom six, so I wouldn't be overly shocked if he winds up getting claimed. I think he's still, like I said, a really decent player. I think he definitely fit in extraordinarily well in a team's bottom six. He's not going to be a huge, fantastic, flashy player who puts up a ton of points, but he is someone who could definitely, I think, help a team in their bottom six. So it will be interesting to see. He can definitely score. He showed that as Calgary Calgary this year and last year too, so I definitely think there's a possibility Duehr gets claimed. So I wouldn't rule out the fact that he does get claimed, but I also think that there's a possibility that with him being more of a bottom six forward and maybe not being too much of an upgrade on too many teams' bottom sixes, he does wind up clearing. But I think for a team who could definitely use some more bottom six help, Duehr will definitely get claimed. So it will be interesting to see, but I definitely think there's a strong chance Duehr gets claimed. So those are the two waiver updates we have over the past couple of days. Zohorna was placed on waivers. Thought there was a possibility he could get claimed given how well he's played this year, but he does wind up getting cleared. And then Duehr was placed on waivers yesterday, and while we haven't figured out if he has claimed or been cleared yet, I do think there's a very likely possibility that Duehr could wind up getting claimed, but also wouldn't be overly shocked if he did wind up clearing. So it'll be interesting to see. I'll have to wait and see on how that goes. But those are two waiver updates over the past couple of days. Going over to the injury update from the past few days as well. There's not been too many injury updates from the past couple of days, but definitely some interesting ones. Jack Eichel's lower body injury is an update. He's going to be out week to week, so that's a horrible blow for the Vegas Golden Knights. For the Anaheim Ducks, Radko Gudas is a lower body injury and is out for an unknown period of time. For the New York Islanders and the Chicago Blackhawks, Islanders and Pierre Engvall, Chicago Blackhawks, and Connor Murphy both have injuries. Pellick, upper body injury, Murphy a lower body injury, both are out day to day. Scott Wedgewood has a lower body injury and is out day to day for the Dallas Stars. So those are some really bad injury blows, but Kyle Connor was clear of play and got back into game action for Winnipeg Jets. That's really good news there. Meanwhile, Nick Schmaltz with undisclosed injury. Mikael Granlund has a low upper body injury, and Nikita Zaitsev has a knee injury. All are going to be out for a period of time, so it's really bad blows there. Kasperi Kapanen has a lower body injury. It's going to keep him out the next 4 weeks. That's a really bad blow for St. Louis Blues. Alex Barkov has a lower body injury and is out day to day for the Panthers. That's a really bad blow. Trent Frederick has an undisclosed injury and is out day to day, so that's a really bad blow. Mikael Granlund has upper body injury and is out week to week, so that's a really bad blow for San Jose Sharks. Not really great news there that he's going to be out week to week, but we did see Dmitry Kolyakov in Florida, Ullmark, which is a huge one in Boston, and Meyer, which is another huge one in Jersey, all be cleared to play and should be able to get back into game action in the not too distant future. So those are some really good injury updates there. Ullmark, Meyer, Connor, and Winnipeg all getting back into game action is fantastic news for some of these teams. But to see Kapanen go out for the next 4 weeks, Granlund and Eichel be out for the next week-to-week period of time. Some of these other guys be out for some significant period of time too. It's not overly great. Hopefully these guys are able to get back in the not too distant future. But those are the injury updates from the past couple of days. Nothing really substantial, but still really good to see guys like Ullmark and Meyer get back into game action. And lastly, we're going over to a couple of trade rumors. First was the LA Kings. Talking on the Jeff Merrick show a couple of days ago, Elliot Freeman wonders about Arthur Kailyev from LA Kings. Now, the LA Kings, Arthur Kailyev has been a fantastic player over the past couple of years. He fit in really well last year. He started out the season extraordinarily well, but over the past couple of games, I think over the last week or two, he's been healthy scratched quite a few times. And Elliot Freeman does wonder if there is a possibility that Kailyev could wind up being a trade chip for the LA Kings. So he does think that it is a little weird that he's been sitting for quite a little bit of time now over the past little while. I'm not saying he will get traded, but Kalyev's a really good, at this point in time, middle six forward. He's got the potential to be a solid top six, 25-30 goal scorer, I think, at the NHL level. Now, the one thing that could lead him to be traded by the LA Kings is the fact that they have a ton of prospects in the minors. They have guys like Madden, Thomas, Turcotte, Fagemo, amongst others. They are loaded with forward prospects. So if they were to move Kailyev, they could definitely give another rookie roster spot in the not too distant future. So I do think there's a possibility Kailyev could get traded. Now, I'm not exactly sure what they would want for him. Would they want a draft pick? Would they want to try and deal him in sort of a bigger trade to get an upgrade, whether it be a goalie upgrade or a defensive upgrade, which I think they could definitely use at this point in time. So it will be interesting to see, but I could see Kailyev wind up getting moved. Elliot Freeman is right. It is a little bit surprising that Kailyev has been healthy scratched a couple of times over the last little while, and I do think that if they were willing to trade him, they could definitely trade him to try and get an upgrade on their team for their current playoff run. So it will be interesting to see, but Kailyev might be a name we have to watch out for, just given the fact that he has been a little bit of a healthy scratch over the past little while, and that he could wind up getting dealt. Not saying he will be. I think there's a very likely chance he winds up staying, and that he continues to work as a top 9 forward in LA. But if the Kings don't really find a huge future there with him, and they want to try and get some of the younger guys like Madden, Thomas, Turcotte in their lineup at the NHL level, I could see Kailyev wind up getting moved. So it's a situation we're going to have to watch out for. Going over to Chicago Blackhawks in the insider training video on TSN, there was a lot of talk about the Chicago Blackhawks, and like we talked about, Dickinson's recently signed now, Nick Foligno's recently signed. So with these two signings now being done, it sounds like, according to the people in the insider trading, the Blackhawks are probably not going to be huge sellers this year. They don't have a ton of pending UFAs anymore. Peter Mrazek's one, I think Jared Tonorti's another. There might be a couple of other lower end pending UFAs, but there's none that have huge high end potentials being top end UFAs. I think Foligno could have easily gotten himself themselves like a 3rd round pick. Dickinson maybe a 3rd or 4th round pick and a decent prospect. So I think there will have been some interest in those two guys, but now with those two guys being signed, there's not a whole bunch of players out there who could definitely be moved at the deadline. There could still be a couple of guys. I would not say the Blackhawks are not going to do anything, because I do think they will be doing something, but it doesn't seem like they'll be as big of trade deadline sellers as they originally were sought to be. They'll try and move off a couple of pending UFA pieces, but they're trying to build their culture and start to try and get some guys in their lineup. So it will be interesting to see if the Hawks do wind up doing anything, but it does sound like at this point in time they'll probably wind up not doing very much at the deadline. And after the Dickinson and Foligno signings, and maybe even a Primo Razak signing in the near future, it seems like all of their pending UFAs are starting to be taken off the market. So it will be interesting to see, but according to people in insider trading, don't expect the Hawks to do a whole bunch of things at this year's trade deadline, and expect them to be sellers, but not too big of sellers. So we'll be interested to see if they do that, but I do expect the Hawks to still be sellers, but with only guys like Mrazek, Tenorti, and a couple of other smaller and pending UFAs on their team, it does seem very likely they will probably wind up being sellers. And also ruling out the fact they could move a couple of other guys that aren't UFAs, like Connor Murphy, Andreas Athanasiou, something like that. They could wind up moving those guys, but I do think it's very unlikely given the fact that they're trying to build a winning culture in that team. So it will be interesting to see, but the Hawks are going to be sellers, but according to people in insider trading, they're not going to be huge sellers at this year's trade deadline. Next, going to Tampa Bay Lightning. Recently, GM Julien Brisebois was talking about Steven Stamkos, and he said he had no intention on trading him during the season, and that was that. So it sounded like he really shut down any sort of rumors that Stamkos was being dealt in season before a deadline. So I don't think Stamkos will get dealt, but according to people in the insider trading video, Chris Johnston did say that there's a very likely chance that even though he's not going to be on the trade bait list, he could definitely still be on the free agent board. And it's still interesting to see if he'll wind up staying in Tampa or not. I think there's going to be a very interesting situation there to watch out for. We know Stamkos was frustrated at training camp, saying that there was not too much conversation and that he really wanted to try and remain in Tampa. We know that we saw some of these other Tampa Bay guys like Brendan Hagel last offseason. We also saw guys like Kucherov over the past little while, Point, Sergachev, Chernak, Sorelli, Vasilevsky, all get extensions way ahead of before they were becoming UFAs, and Stamkos is here, a pending UFA right now. So it's going to be interesting to see if he stays in Tampa or not. According to GM at the training camp, they said they really want to evaluate where the direction was going after this year and if it made sense to keep Stamkos. Now, I think Stamkos really wants to remain there. You also got to remember that Florida is a non-tax state, so it's easier to sign there in Tampa than it is to sign elsewhere. So if Stamkos likes, let's say, a $9.5 million player, he could definitely sign for $8.5 million in Tampa. So I don't think a deal would be overly complicated to extend in Tampa, and I think he really wants to remain there. So with the fact that he wants to remain in Tampa, with the fact that Tampa's in a no-tax state, makes it easier to sign a player for a cheaper cap hit. I do think it's possible that we do see a Stamkos extension, but if the Bolts continue to not do overly well, they missed the playoffs this year, it doesn't look like they're doing overly fantastic, maybe they walk away from Stamkos. It's quite possible. So this situation is still going to be one to watch out for. It's not a guarantee that it's over. It does sound like he probably won't get dealt around deadline, and I think with them being still in the playoff hunt, they'd probably rather keep him and try and go for a playoff run again rather than trade him at deadline and possibly miss. So it will be interesting to see, but it does sound like Stamkos, according to a couple of people, is not going to be on the trade bait list, but it's still going to be on a free agent board, and it's still going to be a really interesting to watch out for in the offseason. So we're going to have to wait and watch out for and see if Stamkos winds up getting dealt there. Going over to the Ottawa Senators, there's still a lot of talk around Jacob Chychrun. Since I posted my last video, there was a couple of sources on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, that were saying, I'm not exactly sure if this is 100% true. I'm not sure if their sources are 100% legit or not, but there are some who are saying, just like David Pagano was saying, that Chychrun's not feeling overly fantastic in Ottawa anymore, and that there's a very likely chance that a long-term deal will not be able to get done between those two sides, and the Senators could definitely try and trade Chychrun before his deal is expired. So that's a really interesting situation to watch out for. I've seen this from multiple sources now. Some I'm not exactly sure if their credibility is overly fantastic, but still, it sounds like there seems to be enough stuff from a lot of different sources that Chychrun's name may be actually in play here for the Ottawa Senators. You know, Elliot Friedman did say that the Senators were checking in on some of their players, seeing what their value is in the open markets, but it does sound like there's a very likely chance that Chychrun could get moved by the deadline. It's not a guarantee by any means, but it's a possibility. Chychrun has this year plus next year left at a $4.6 million cap hit. He's a solid top 4 defenseman. He's fitting fantastically in the Ottawa Senators blue line. I've seen a couple of reports also saying that they value Chabot more than they do Chychrun, so they'd rather trade Chychrun rather than Chabot. And Chychrun's also, like we said, this year plus next year $4.6 million. So he's not a long-term contract, where Chabot has this year, I think, plus 4 more seasons at $8 million. So it will be interesting to see if Chychrun winds up getting dealt again at the trade deadline. A couple of teams who I could see have some interest. We got a team like Dallas. I've seen them be linked to Ottawa. St. Louis and LA were some of the names that were also brought up. St. Louis was interested in Chychrun last year. LA as well. I could see some other teams have some interest. So it will be interesting to see. They gave up a first and 2 seconds for him. Will they be able to get that back in return? I'm not exactly sure. A lot of people are wondering that if they were to trade Chychrun, could this be another Alex DeBrincat situation where they gave up a lot of assets to trade for a solid player, and then a year or two later they trade him away and get not very much in return? So it's going to be interesting to see, but there's a lot of reports out there that say that Chychrun is not really willing to sign an extension in Ottawa, and if that's true, there is a very likely possibility we could see Chychrun trade, if not right now, before a trade deadline, then in the offseason when they're trying to retool this team to try and get into the playoffs again. So it will be interesting to see, but it does sound like Chychrun is a very likely candidate to be traded. It does sound like Chychrun is a name who's currently out there right now, and according to some reports, we could see a Chychrun trade in the not distant future. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that with all of these reports, there's a very likely chance we could see a Chychrun trade, maybe even instead of a Chabot deal. So I'm not exactly sure it's the right deal. He's been a fantastic player for Ottawa. I think if I was them, I would rather keep him, but at the same time, it's going to be interesting to see if he does wind up staying or going. But I do think he's been a fantastic defender, and I think if they are to move him, they better get a huge package in return, because they shouldn't be giving him up for anything less than what they required to get for him. So it will be interesting to see. And last year, going over to Minnesota Wild, there's a lot of talk in the Insider Trading video talking about the Minnesota Wild and Marc-Andre Fleury, and it sounds like they're, at this point in time, the Wild are not really considering themselves sellers. They still think they can make the playoffs, but if you look at the landscape at this point in time, I don't see the Wild making the playoffs. They had a horrible start. Even after the coaching change, they haven't done overly well. If you look at the Edmonton Oilers, they have a lot better of a chance now to make the playoffs after their poor start, because after a coaching change, I think they're like 21-6-0 or 22-6-0 or something like that. They've been absolutely phenomenal since the coaching change. The Minnesota Wild have been so-and-so since the coaching change. They definitely got back up into a race for a little bit there, and they definitely got back above 500 for a little bit there too, but they're now down back below 500. They just ended a 4-game losing streak. They're not doing overly well right now. They definitely look like they could be a team who's going to be a seller at the deadline. Now, they don't have a ton of people that they could have to be sellers at the deadline. If you told me at the beginning of the season that the Wild would be sellers, I would have said, okay, cool, they could definitely move some pieces. But a couple of weeks before a season, they wound up signing some of the UFAs. Their 3 biggest UFAs going into this year were Marcus Foligno, Matt Zuccarello, and Ryan Hartman. Hartman, a decent top 6 forward who can play center or wing, who's a really, really good versatile player. Zuccarello, who's fitting extremely well with Kaprizov on their top line, could definitely be a solid middle 6 winger. And Foligno, who's definitely been a really good rough and tumble type forward who can also put up points and could definitely be fitting in a team's top 9. Those would have all been really, really good trade options for Minnesota Wild. Unfortunately, they were all signed before the season started. Zuccarello got a 2-year, $4 million extension. Hartman got a 3-year deal, if I'm correct, at just over $4 million. And Foligno got a 4-year deal, I think, at just around $4.25 million. So all of those guys wound up getting extensions instead of being left as UFAs, and now there's really not much the Wild could do. They have a couple of decent bomb-end players who are pending UFAs. Alex Goligoski's one of them, Patrick Maroon, Brendan Duehr, amongst a couple of others. But the one big name that is still left as the pending UFA is Marc-Andre Fleury, and it sounds like his name could be getting a ton of attention. Now, it sounds like teams are waiting right now because they still feel that the Minnesota Wild view themselves as a playoff team. But if they continue to falter a little bit over the next little while, and they find themselves, like, let's say, still 7, 8, 9 points out of a playoff spot at the trade deadline, they will be sellers, and I do think there's a very likely chance Fleury could be dealt. Now, it sounds like, according to people in Insider Trading, they were talking about Fleury, and they said that Fleury will only be dealt to a team where he has a very good chance to be a starter. He doesn't want to be a backup for a playoff run. He wants to try and have another chance to win a Stanley Cup. So I could see a couple of teams have some interest in him. He's not making a huge amount of money. The Wild could retain half of his salary. I could see teams like, let's say, Carolina be a team. I'm not sure if they'd be willing to go to Kachekov for a full playoff series, or Ranta. So I could see the Canes have some interest. Devils, I'm not sure if they really want to go to Vanacek or Schmid for a series. So I could definitely see the Devils have some interest. Maybe even the Oilers. I could definitely see them them give Fleury the net instead of Stuart Skinner. So it will be interesting to see if Fleury does wind up getting moved. It's quite a big possibility, and I do think it could happen. Like I said, depending UFA, he could wind up staying in Minnesota. He's got a no movement clause if I'm correct, so he decides where he goes. But if there is a possibility that the Wild do wind up being sellers, then I do think there's a possibility Fleury winds up getting traded. Maybe he's not the only one. I know that there's only a couple of pending UFAs, but could they try and move more? I do wonder if that's a possibility. Merrill's, I think, got this year plus next year. He's at a cheaper cap, and I could see them try and move him. Marcus Johansson, he's got this year plus next year, $2 million. I could see them try and move him. Another guy who seems to be coming up a lot is Joel Eriksson-Ek, and I don't think he'll get traded. Personally, I think he's more likely to stay in Minnesota. He's been a really good, fantastic second-line center for them. But there has been a little bit of talk that he could wind up being another trade candidate for the Minnesota Wild. A team that's been linked to him very heavily has been the Vancouver Canucks, that I don't think that they would really want to acquire a second-line center at this point in time. But I do think there's a possibility that if Eriksson-Ek's name continues to come up, there are a couple of teams out there who are looking for some center help, like Colorado, Boston, amongst others. Maybe the Wild do wind up considering trading him. But he's been a really good fit there in Minnesota, so I wouldn't guarantee that he winds up getting moved, but his name has come out over the past little while, and I do sort of wonder if he winds up getting moved at some point. So it will be interesting to see, but I do think there's a very likely possibility that the Wild are going to be sellers at the deadline with where they're on the standings. 8 points out, still have to leapfrog, I think, 5 teams to make the playoffs. The odds are stacked against them. Unless they go on another heater, they're not going to make the playoffs. And if they are sellers, expect Marc-Andre Fleury to be dealt, as long as he's okay with the trade, and for him to go to a cup-contending team. And on top of that, expect possible other departments there in Minnesota. Could we see Eriksson-Ek? It's possible. But I would also expect guys like Maroon, Duehr, Johansson, Goligoski, and Merrill to be among the guys who are also being discussed as possible trade options there for the Minnesota Wild. So we'll be interested to see. But those are some of the rumors we've had over the past couple of days. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. Do you see Marc-Andre Fleury getting traded? I personally do see it. Pending UFA, the Wild are probably going to be a selling team. I definitely think there's a very likely chance he winds up getting dealt. Where he goes, not exactly sure, but I do think there's a very likely chance Fleury gets dealt. Do you see any other Wild getting dealt? Duehr, Maroon, Johansson, could Eriksson-Ek get traded? I think there's a possibility, but very unlikely. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see. But do you see any other Wild getting traded? Do you see the Ottawa Senators train Jakob Chychrun either this year or in the offseason? I think it's possible with all the reports that are coming out right now. It doesn't sound like Chychrun's overly happy in Ottawa, and he may not want to extend there. And if he doesn't want to extend there, I see the Ottawa Senators possibly moving on from him. So it will be interesting to see, but I really do think there's a possibility at this point in time that Chychrun could get moved, and teams who need a top 4 defenseman should definitely be calling Ottawa if Chychrun is available. But Ottawa definitely needs to get a huge package in return. For the Lightning, do they wind up moving Stamkos? I don't see it happening in season, but could they move on from him in the offseason? That's a completely different story. It sounds like they may not want to re-sign him, but I definitely think if they want to re-sign him, Stamkos wants to remain there. They could sign him for like $8.5 million. He could definitely remain there on like a 3-year deal. I could definitely see that happen for Tampa, so it will be interesting to see. Do you see the Hawks being huge sellers at this point in time? It doesn't seem like they will be. They signed Dickinson and Fleury, who are two big pending UFAs. It sounds like they could sign Mrazek in the not too distant future. It sounds like they're probably trying to build around their core right now to try and keep some of these players. Could they still make moves? Absolutely. They have Tenorti. They could still see Mrazek be moved. There's a couple of other pending UFAs on that team. Could they move a guy like Murphy or Anthony Sue, who aren't pending UFAs but could be trade deadline acquisitions? Absolutely. But it seems like at this point in time they're trying to build around their core instead of moving pieces off. So it'll be interesting to see if those guys get moved. And do you see obviously Kailyev get moved by the LA Kings? I don't think it's very likely at this point in time, but he's a really good young player. And if the Kings want to get guys like Turcotte, Madden, and Thomas into the NHL roster, they're going to need to clear space, and one of those guys may be Arthur Kailyev. So we're going to have to wait and see. But there's a very likely chance I think Kailyev could wind up getting moved by the LA Kings. So it'll be interesting to see. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on what Kailyev, and what do you think about the waiver updates, injury updates, and the Dickinson signing. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all that down in the comment section below. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. I'm going to take this video, and for related to subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do without you guys, so don't forget to subscribe so we can hit 250 subscribers. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so if you check that out, I'll leave links down in the description below, and I can't wait to see you guys all for our next video. See you guys soon.